Please consider supporting Black Women United YEG for the protection and advancement of black women and girls in Alberta. You can learn more about them at bwunited.ca. They are always looking for donations and volunteers. So please, again, support Black Women United YEG for the protection and advancement of black women and girls in Alberta. Again, that website is bwunited.ca.
Hey, this is Adam from Toronto, and I support Creative Control because Vish is full stop one of the best arts interviewers in Canada, or anywhere in the world, really. He approaches every episode like he's known the artist for years, creating a conversational atmosphere that gets straight to the heart of the work. No one else in podcasting gets it quite right like he does, with a mixture of meticulous research, wise artistic insights, and well-humored personal connections. I proudly support Vish and Creative Control on Patreon. You should too.
To make your flexible monthly donation to Creative Control, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control today.
Kass Richards is a talented songwriter, musician, and singer based just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. Originally from rural Virginia, Richardson performs music under the name Kass Richards and is an active collaborator with Remy in the latter's wondrous band, U.S. Girls. Following the 2020 release of her folk-inspired debut solo album, The Language Shadow, Richards worked with Maximilian Turnbull from Époque Ensemble and U.S. Girls on its more rocking follow-up. It's called New Love Meditation. It was released by Good Cry Records on June 24th, 2024, and it prompted Kass and I to have a talk about becoming a mother during the COVID-19 pandemic, the Boston Celtics and their fan base needing to live near water, being encouraged to enter recording studios by Basia, Bulat, and Remy, and making New Love Meditation with Max Turnbull, how Geordie Gordon can play every single instrument, growing up near the busy Washington D.C. live music circuit, mindfulness and grieving, how going through labor can feel close to death, some tour dates, other future plans, and much more. A part of the Lionsgate Sound Network with the support of listeners like you who follow and subscribe to this listener-supported and donor-driven podcast. Spread the word about it, leave nice reviews and ratings on your podcast platform, and make flexible monthly donations at patreon.com/Creative Control, which is the primary and most reliable way for podcasters like me to make a living. This is my primary source of income right now. This is my main job. And at Patreon, a monthly subscription of $6 American or its currency equivalent means you can access every single episode of the show ad-free in its entirety, which is not the case without that subscription. Now, of course, all amounts are welcome. In fact, if you or someone you know is like a wealthy patron of the arts type person and wants to give more than the highest tier amount here, go forth, please. But if you can't afford that and you just want to contribute to the show, it's really appreciated. So again, check out the tiers and benefits, and if you can support this show financially, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Again, learn more at patreon.com/Creative Control. Plus in-kind support from independent businesses like Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Ontario, and Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, Ontario. This is episode 881 of Creative Control, featuring the thoughtful and unique Kass Richards, with your host, me, Vish Khanna. Hi, Kass. How's it going?
I'm good, Vish. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's really lovely to see you after a number of years. I can't remember the last time I saw you.
Yeah, I was trying to think of that too. It's been probably about 5 years because I think the last time we saw each other was at Hillside.
Yes.
Maybe that night, which was a really fun show. But I think that was maybe the last time we saw each other in person. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know that. Did you play the last Hillside with U.S. Girls as well? The last time they played, I don't feel like you were there. Is that possible?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and a lot has changed for you, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I have a daughter now, and so yeah. Actually, I think the last U.S. Girls show that I was at was in April of. Oh, it was last year, I think. I made a brief appearance because they played locally. So that was really fun. But yeah, my daughter, Maisie, is turning 3 in July.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that's like a pretty big change.
Congratulations on Macy, and also thanks to Macy for inspiring a beautiful song about herself.
I'll thank her. I'll thank her for you.
You said locally, and I normally ask people where they are. Where in the world are you today, Kass?
I am in Watertown, Massachusetts. Do you know where Watertown is?
I assume it's sort of near Boston. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Boston area?
Boston area. Everything here is pretty close together. So yeah, I'm right by Boston, Cambridge. They're right next door, basically.
Yeah. You're from Virginia originally, is that correct?
Yeah. I was born in Virginia. I lived there until after college, and just kind of gradually kept moving farther northeast. But yeah, still have family there, and get back there a good amount.
Did you go to college in Boston or where?
No, I went to college in Virginia.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So what brought you to Boston? Are you a big Dunkin' Donuts fan? What is it? That's all we know is Ben Affleck.
Well,
Matt
it's
Damon.
Dunkin', Vish. It's not Dunkin' Donuts anymore.
It's just called Dunkin'. Sorry, yes, I missed the
rebranded.
They don't invite me to all their marketing meetings. I think I would have protested. But yeah, sorry. What what brought you to Boston exactly?
I moved here from Philly. It's been a while now. I think it was like 2012. I had lived in Philly for quite a while, and my then partner, now husband, did his postdoc here. So we moved up here together, not really planning to stay here forever, but we ended up staying here. It just worked for us. And he also got a teaching position locally because if you know this area at all, there are schools everywhere. Like you can't walk a block without, a university happening. So we were very lucky that he got a job locally, that we didn't have to move to Wisconsin or wherever. No offense to Wisconsin, but you kind of just have to go where you're placed. So yeah, we just ended up staying here.
Well, that sounds nice. And as we're speaking, I must give you a begrudging congratulations because your Boston Celtics just won the NBA Finals.
Yes.
I don't know. Do you follow basketball at all, Kass?
Not really.
No.
But I did hear that, that was kind of a big thing. And I know that there's a parade here on Friday. Yeah.
Did you know that as soon as they won, the entire team flew to Miami, Florida?
I did not know that.
This team, by the way, I grew up a Boston Celtics fan. And I cheer because of Larry Bird primarily, but I also... I followed them and I liked them. I was happy when they won their last championship. I liked that squad. This team, Kass, is very hated. Like, people hate them. They are I don't know if this will resonate with you at all, but the majority of basketball fans have a penchant for hating the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yes, I know about this. Mm-hmm.
You know about this? Okay,
I do.
Yes.
That has to do with, that's like Shaq era, right? Was it
no,
before? It's always
Magic,
been that way?
It's sort of Magic Johnson era. It's the Showtime
right, because
era.
the Lakers and the Celtics have like a big time rivalry. Yes. I remember the Bird and Magic rivalry. Good. Yeah, I have some history, but just not recent. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You don't follow it anymore. When did you stop following basketball?
It's been some years. But I grew up playing like NBA Jam, so I had a good sense of basketball based on video games.
Did you ever play yourself?
I did, actually, yeah. And I played basketball when I was much younger. So I was into it at that time, but that was a while ago. Yeah. Yeah,
and we don't have to dwell on it too much. I just want to draw a connection between what you were saying about the colleges in Boston area and the Celtics, because they are hated, the team is hated, and the fan base is hated. in particular. The fan base is ridiculed for being, well,
obnoxious,
racist, lunkheads, And I was thinking about this as you were speaking. Yes, Boston is famous for Harvard, MIT, the Boston College is there. I think the Berklee School of Music is there, So all these higher education institutions that get a lot of respect. And yet, for a good chunk of the populace, Boston residents are thought of as being not that bright. So you're there, you're living there, and I'm not asking you to comment because I don't want you to get in trouble among the people you live with, but you like it in Boston, you're there. Does anything I'm saying resonate with you about the kind of atmosphere or the general vibe of this sort of like, we're really smart, but also some people not so much? Do you got that at all?
Well, I'm probably not the best person to ask only because I'm not like out and about in Boston, but I do think, there are maybe some class issues that you're bringing up. And I think that because of that, Boston does get a bad rap. On the other hand, as in most cities, especially in the States, racism, those kinds of things are an issue. So, yeah, I don't think you're that far off.
It's not an unfair characterization. However, it might not be as anomalous in your country, maybe. No, I mean, I'll give you an example. This is I think this is a pretty classic example of a general Boston fan. So even though I'm kind of maybe being a little coy about my sports knowledge, I do enjoy going to games sometimes. And at some point, I was going to baseball games more regularly because Fenway is actually really fun to go to. Have you ever been to that park? No, the only big league park in America I've been to is Wrigley Field. And that was prior to all the recent advancements. It was old school. I'm used to going to games at the Sky Dome or whatever it's called in Toronto. Has a new name. Right, where the Blue Jays play. The Blue Jays play, and when you go, it's insane because it's a relatively modern stadium. I mean, it's old now, but they've modernized it. So jumbotrons, music the whole time, screaming at you. You go to Wrigley Field and it's so quaint and beautiful. There's it's like a makeshift scoreboard, by hand. They're changing the score, I think. And then the ads are just like, go see Murray for insurance. And, Murray, it's so beautiful. I think it's changed now. So I loved the experience just compared to the Toronto one. I loved going to that game. I went to a Cubs game many years ago when I was visiting Electrical Audio and, anyway, sorry. Sorry to answer your question. I have not been to a game at Fenway Park. I'm sorry. Okay. No, well, that's a good reference because Wrigley and Fenway are pretty similar, I think, in character and just overall vibe because they're really old stadiums and there's a lot of wood, It's like lots of wooden seats. Hand scoring, things like this. The Green Monster, which is that's what Fenway is most famous for. The giant wall. But depending on where you're sitting, you can really get the full experience of being around hardcore Boston fans. And so if you sit in the bleachers, if you're sitting way out and people are drinking for hours, because it's baseball is the games are long, right? Yeah. So people get progressively more drunk. And I was there with my husband and a friend of ours who has for quite a while had a very long beard that he's really proud of. And he just likes to have a long beard. And something happened where we were sitting in the stands and I think maybe he accidentally bumped into a woman sitting in front of him or something like that. And she turned around and without blinking was like, you look like a wizard. Just immediately, just put him in his place. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. Yeah. So that was a pretty minor experience. It could have been a lot worse, but just you get you got a taste of the accent and then just someone being don't touch me, and also cutting you down really quickly. We've heard about this. What do you think it is? Why are the Boston people so hardcore about everything? We've heard this and not afraid of violence. I just saw a clip of some young kid in a Luka Doncic, jersey getting, physically pushed around by these Boston fans. What is it? What's going on? Why are they so upset?
I don't know, Vish. I don't know what the answer is, but I would say like Boston's a really small city. And I think in that realm, like sports and things like this, where it is, the whole thing is being competitive, that Boston is more defensive or something in that way because it's not as like fancy or big as other cities, but it kind of tries to be. And so I guess in the sports realm, like those things are just all magnified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen,
Yeah.
I didn't bring you on to dissect Boston. I appreciate the insight there. And it sounds like you're there to stay for the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm.
You like it.
Yeah.
You do like it.
I do. I mean, I like, where we are right now, like where I'm sitting in a studio that I rent that's right down the street from my house, literally like a block away, that I rent from my neighbor across the street, who's also a musician, and it's a 10-minute walk to the river. My needs are pretty simple at this point. Like I just need to be able to be close to water, which thankfully, I can just go to the river. I can walk around. There's a lot of nature that is close by. Yeah. And I like this area.
Did you just say you need to be close to water? Is that what you just said? Are you a mermaid?
I am a mermaid. Yes. I hadn't told you that yet. So yeah.
I didn't notice that when we were at Hillside together or any other time we've encountered each other. No, am I right? Did you say I need to be close to water?
I guess, I don't know if I said I need to, but maybe I did. Yes, if I can at all, if it's possible to be near water, I definitely like to be near water. It's very calming, and there's a huge river that runs from where I am, like, down to Boston and eventually to the Atlantic. And I think it's also, it's good for just orienting, like, oh, this river is here, but then it's also in the next town over and the next town over, and then it eventually goes to the ocean. So, and I grew up kind of in the middle of nowhere, like in the country. And so I think those kinds of things are always helpful for me, just to orient myself, like know where I am,
Yeah. No, that's really fascinating. Huh.
Yeah. I could go really down the rabbit hole with the things at the river, but there's some cool water birds. It's a good hang.
Well, I guess it's appropriate then that you live in a place called Watertown. I mean, right? That's just who you are. Water is important to you after living in some sort of agricultural desert or something. I'm not sure where you... What was it, farmland? Is that what you were intimating? No. When you lived in Virginia?
Pretty much.
Yeah?
Yeah. Where I lived in Virginia. So I didn't grow up on a farm, but I definitely grew up around farms. And my mom's current partner, who she's been with for over 20 years, had a farm that his family sold. And as many families did at a certain point, like in the 90s, sold off farmland to developers. Yeah. So a lot of it became, housing developments. But then also this thing started to happen where vineyards, like people started to buy the land to make vineyards. So now if I go back to visit, what used to be farmland is a lot of vineyards and stuff like that.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I appreciate the interest in the water and your sort of philosophical explanation as to why you're drawn to water. Because I hear on this beautiful new album of yours some semblance of the same philosophical curiosities and wonderings, if you will. First of all, congratulations on this lovely album, Kass. It's great.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about how this album kind of came to be? I see you worked with some mutual friends of ours and previous guests on the show, among other people. Let's start with that. Who did you work with and how did this record kind of come about? Can you explain?
Yeah, absolutely. So the record itself, I worked with Max Turnbull, who helped me produce it. And we recorded it at Patchwork Studios with Dave Plowman. It started, I'm always pretty casual about the beginnings of recording an album. This happened with my first album too, where I reached out to Basia, Bulat, and was like, hey, I have a couple of songs. Maybe I could just come up and like, we could have a slumber party and I could just record some stuff like in your home studio, just totally casual, you know, and she was like, no, you need to go to a studio. That's like, it would be much better for you to go to a studio. So a similar thing happened with this album where I was maybe a year out from having my first child and had written some songs at home, from home, and had been talking to Meg a lot, Meg Remy, about how I might record them. So similarly, I was like, hey, I want to come see you all. Why don't I just come up there and we'll just record these songs in your basement? like, and you know, they have like a basement set up. And yeah, and Meg was like, why don't you go to a studio?
Why do you suppose both Basia and Meg had that suggestion to you? Like, irrespective of one another, they both said the same thing. Do you have a sense of why they might have said that?
Well, I think initially for the first record, I had never recorded my own work in a studio before. I had recorded other people's things, but I think, especially with the first record, it just felt more daunting. So it was very nebulous to me, the idea of going to a studio and recording my songs. It wasn't like that with other people's stuff, but it was with mine. It just felt like, oh, it's like too much stuff or whatever. And like, I'm pretty comfortable and familiar with just doing more home recording type stuff, like pretty lo-fi type things, or at least that's my background. So then, but I think, yeah, when I talked to Basia about the first record, and Meg was the same, I think what they had in common was just like, no, it's like, your songs deserve to be recorded in a studio.
I was going to say, like, maybe they both picked up on the fact that you are a humble and modest person, probably. And maybe they were just trying to gently suggest that you take yourself a bit more seriously, if you will. No disrespect to lo-fi recording or home recording or anything like that, particularly this day and age.
Sure.
You can get an amazing, we all know some of our favorite records were made by people in their homes. As I'm speaking to you, I'm just on the other side of a Bruce Springsteen kick that I go through every few years. I was precipitated by a new book about him and his album Born in the USA. It's called There Was Nothing You Could Do by Stephen Hayden. And anyway, I just was listening to Nebraska this week as we're speaking, and you're just like, geez, like this guy just did this by himself at his house, and it's perfect. Yeah. And, you know, the lore on that one in particular is they never thought about releasing it as it was. They tried to recreate it in studios, and everyone involved was like, no, this isn't working, and the feeling is way better on this intimate home recording. Sorry, that was a long way of saying I have the utmost respect for home recording. I'm sure Meg and Basia do as well. But maybe they sense, I'll go back to what I was trying to say. It's like maybe they just sensed your own self-consciousness and were like, Kass, if anyone deserves to be in a studio, you know, and do this right, it's you. You shouldn't sell yourself short. Sorry, does any of that resonate?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think... yeah, both Basia and Meg were a huge influence on me, just literally just physically getting into a studio and to see that it wasn't such an opaque process. And yeah, and once the first record was done, which that record, Basia also, she co-produced that with me and was a huge help and helped to make that record happen. Then, I felt more... like I had a grip on what it meant to be in a studio. I think it's also just my particular musical background. I am not a trained musician. I've played music since I was a kid, and it's obviously very important to me, but I definitely come from a more folk background, and just the prospect of like potentially having to play a song over and over again that's like my worst nightmare. But then I realized like, you actually can just do things mostly live too. It's like you can do it the way that you want to do it.
Yeah,
you know?
So, a couple of takes kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And both of the albums were recorded somewhat similarly, where it's like, yeah, just trying to get it as live as possible and then kind of adding some flourishes. And so yeah, Basia and Meg definitely major part of me getting into a studio at all. So for this most recent album, I had been talking to Meg about it, and I think she had mentioned to Max, or maybe I reached out to Max. One of us did, and he had recently recorded with Badge, his group Badge Époque Ensemble, at the same studio at Patchwork. And so he had already worked with Dave Plowman. He had a good experience there. And so he recommended that we go there.
This is in Toronto?
So yeah, it's in Toronto. It's in the East End.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I had a couple of phone or virtual type conversations with Dave before going up there. And then flew up in November of 2022. And we went into the studio, we recorded over 4 days, and then I went home, and then we pretty much mixed and did everything else remotely, like once I got back. Yeah.
Okay. I want to get into the sound, and as I sort of maybe clumsily suggested, a philosophical tone to the lyrics. And I want to get into that in a moment, but you said something there that I would like to delve into about your musical background and coming from folk. What prompted you to first listen to music and become interested in music? Do you have any memory of that?
I definitely remember. Yes, okay, so I should start by saying both of my parents were older when they had me, and I had a bunch of siblings from their previous marriages.
I see.
So by the time I came around, I was essentially an only child. Because I had two brothers that were still in the house, but they were on their way out, like late teenagers. And
half brothers, if you will, is that
half? Technically, half siblings. So yes, I remember from a very early age, because of that, because my parents were older, most of what I was listening to was music that they had listened to when they were younger. So at the time, it was like oldies then. So it was like 60s girl groups and stuff like that. Okay. I have a very specific memory of listening to a Buddy Holly greatest hits tape in my room, like over and over and over again, and just being obsessed with it and obsessed with music from that entire era. I think because it's great music, but also because it gave me like a direct link to my parents at a time when I didn't know them, when they were younger. Yeah, so that's what I listened to initially, and eventually got into just listening to typical pre-teen like pop type stuff, And then because of where I grew up, so I grew up in like a fairly rural area of Virginia, but DC was like the Mecca, basically. That was where people would go to shows. And when I really started getting into going to shows and stuff, I wasn't quite old enough yet. So like the places, which some of them still exist, like 930 Club, Black Cat. I'm sure you've been to some of these places if you've been to the States. Yeah. There was a place in Arlington called Galaxy Hut. I think it was Galaxy Hut. So there were like these places that I was really interested in going to, and eventually started going to shows, but was also fairly intimidated when I was younger. And even though I had started playing music when I was like 11 or 12, was just fairly intimidated by that whole scene, which at the time it was like a lot of Matador stuff. Like this was in the 90s, like Cat Power was starting to get kind of bigger, Pavement, like these kinds of bands that I adored, but again, was just kind of like, a little bit shy about it. So at some point, a friend of mine introduced me to like really, really old folk music, like a cappella, mostly British revival type stuff. And I just latched onto it. I think part of it was that it was really unrefined, which I really loved. And I just really loved the stories, and it felt very accessible to me. So when I really started to perform and feel more comfortable with performing, that was the kind of stuff that I was performing, like basically cornering someone and singing like a 7-minute a cappella song to them, like that kind of thing. And yeah, that's kind of where I became more comfortable with singing in front of people.
Yeah, there's an arrangement you have of a traditional song, I believe, called Love is Teasing on the new album. And then also put me in the frame of mind of something like Fairport Convention or something from that British folk realm. Was that band, or am I close to am I homing in on kind of that realm
definitely,
that you were interested in?
Love Fairport Convention.
Yeah. The other, you mentioned a couple of Matador Records bands that you saw. Did you see those people live?
I did. So I never saw Pavement when I was younger. I did see Cat Power. I was fairly obsessed with Cat Power when I was younger. And at the time, I saw her a couple of times. The performances she was having trouble during those performances. And obviously, like no judgment. It was just the time. And so I would say, I think I saw her twice, and both times she wasn't able to finish. So, but I still thought that she was an incredible musician and loved her records. And I think sorry to interrupt you there. Were there local artists you also saw in that area? I did see, let's see. Who was local who I would have seen? Yeah, I mean, this is so fun. So this is like this is like a deep dive. But I think you know Marc Masters, right? Yes, of course. Yes, we've become friendly. And he was on the show. Yeah. Okay, awesome. So Marc's younger brother I dated when I was much younger. And he used to be in a band called Grubby that I was like, they were awesome. And this was also around the era of Teen Beat. Do you know about Teen Beat? Okay. Yeah. So that was like pretty big in the area that I grew up in. So it was a lot of shows like that, like there was this place called Wavelengths in Leesburg, Virginia. It's like a comic book store where they would have shows. So I remember going to see Grubby. Any given group of friends in high school who had started a band, like it was everybody was in a band basically. It was just kind of a hobby, Yeah. And so, I would definitely go to shows at like the community center or Kick Out the Jams type things. Do they have those in Canada? Like Kick Out the Jams type stuff? I know the MC5 reference. What are you referring to exactly? Okay, so there was this thing called Kick Out the Jams where just like high school or like younger bands would go and play at a community center. So we would call them coffee houses here. It was the coffee house, and then your high school bands would get together and play. Yeah, yes, for sure. Yeah, same idea. So stuff like that. I mean, that was like pretty common. During that time. I'm sure people who know me and my show could tell where I was trying to lead us. Did you see any Discord Records bands growing up in D.C. particularly? I really didn't. Okay. No. Okay. Maybe ahead of your time? I think they were a little bit ahead of my time. Yeah. So like, obviously, like Fugazi, there's like huge legends in that area. And they were I was a little bit younger, I think. Yeah. And so I didn't see them. And honestly, it's interesting because I definitely had friends who managed to go to like Fugazi shows even, when we were pretty young. It was like they had older siblings who would drive them into DC or whatever, Arlington or that area. And again, I think for me around that time, like when I would have potentially been able to see a Fugazi show or something like that, I was just so intimidated by that whole scene. Like, yeah, sure. But it's interesting to think about now. Yeah, where I was at my life at the time, like, I don't know, it's interesting. I just was I felt more kind of on the outside of that whole scene or something. Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, the friendliest, most accommodating and accessible people I've ever really encountered. So, particularly the Fugazi group, and then I think their influence on others just being like, we'll talk to people. We're human beings, nothing intimidating here. On that level. So well, listen, I appreciate that background.
I interrupt this episode of my own show for a brief thank you for hearing my call to support me and my work on Patreon. We have seen a lot of growth in Patreon support over the last little while, which is amazing because that's my primary source of income these days. And I love doing this job that I invented for myself a whole lot. Creative Control is a listener-supported podcast. Do podcasters receive any streaming royalties from podcast platforms? No, not any. Does podcast advertising pay the bills? Not for a show at this scale, no. Do all podcasters get paid by companies for their work like some celebrities do? No, most of us do not. We do this work to support our communities and because we love it. So what's the most reliable source of income for podcasters like me? Crowdfunding platforms like Patreon. So if you love Creative Control with Vish Khanna and want to see it continue, please see the notes in this episode. Click on the link that takes you to my Patreon and its different donation tiers with various incentives and benefits, and support me and my work today. Thank you again so much. I alluded to a couple of songs reminding me of sort of 60s British folk music, and you alluded to that as well. But then there's also just these great pop songs on this album as well that I can't get out of my head, like Gardens and what's the other one that gets, well, there's some sad songs here too, of course. But yeah, no, you've got this interesting combo of, I think, mystical folk and like really catchy, infectious music. Did you have an idea going in of what you wanted to come out with in terms of the sound of this record?
I think I had some basic desires. I knew that I wanted it to be loud, louder than what I typically play. So yeah, I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to my previous record, but the previous record is a little more, well, for one thing, there aren't any drums on it or anything. Yeah. It's much more, I guess, like what you would call folky or something, it's a little more quiet. And so yeah, I knew for sure that I wanted to play with. Sorry, go ahead.
The album starts with these booming drums by Simone TB, the new one. I mean, like you seem like it's definitively different and distinct from your previous record.
Definitely. Yeah. That was certainly intentional. Yeah, I was coming out of being at home so much because of the pandemic and also having my first kid and just sort of living in a very quiet time, like noticeably quiet, especially after touring a good amount with US Girls, and just my sonic experience was very different, like those shows we toured for at least a couple years, and it was like most of what I was doing, I was around amplified instruments. And then when the pandemic happened, amplification altogether went away. I wasn't going to shows anymore, and I wasn't really playing amplified music. And so when I started thinking of these songs and putting them together, I was definitely hearing them as rock songs, or just, like I wanted them to be louder and kind of more bombastic. And so, that really was kind of a general guideline. That was the only thing that I had planned. The rest of it was like, okay, obviously when I wrote the songs, there was a certain structure to them and everything. And then the way that we did it, I sent demos to the band, which is like a dream band. So as you said, Simone TB, who is like a powerhouse, amazing drummer. She was thankfully available. Geordie Gordon was available he played bass on the record, and he did synths, and he did even some fiddle playing because he can play every instrument.
Yes, he can.
He really can, and it's amazing. And Ed Squires, another US Girls friend, did percussion, all kinds of percussion, just like he has, this amazing like Mary Poppins bag of just crazy, like key chimes and just, amazing percussion instruments. So so that was the core band, and I sent them the demos and just kind of gave some very loose ideas of like, this is kind of what I'm thinking it would sound like, but it's never, when you actually get into the studio and you start playing together, that's the great thing about playing with other people. It it evolves and it turns into something else. And, you know, if you have the right people, it's an amazing alchemical experience. So yeah, we went into the studio, and because of this particular band and because of how great they are, they had already done their homework. They knew the songs. They had a general idea of, you know, what we were going to do. So they were ready to go. And with Max producing, it was great because we would just run the song a couple of times, and then he would come in, give us some thoughts, give us some ideas to like help tighten things up, smooth out the arrangements. And then we would run it a couple more times, and then we would basically cut it and then be done, because we had a fairly limited amount of time. I was only in town for 4 days. So it was like, it gave us like a pretty strict, deadline. Because I was like, we got to be done. In 4 days. And that's what we had after 4 days. And so we basically tried to track as much as we could in those 4 days. And then there were some overdubs after, like some nice, just kind of synth type things that Geordie did. And Ed did like this amazing glockenspiel solo on Gardens with a real Glock. So he had to like lug. I think he actually recorded that solo at Max and Meg's, I want to say. I can't remember if he did it in Patchwork Studios or if he did it at Max and Meg's house, but he had to like, I think maybe get an Uber and drag this glockenspiel like over across town to do this solo. So
I'm glad he did. I listening on headphones, because it's mixed kind of subtly, I thought, but it really is a beautiful addition, if I might say. It puts me in like a Springsteen frame of mind or something. Just the way it accentuates some of the rhythms, even. It's beautiful. It's really lovely.
Thank you.
I'm glad you brought up the bass, because I was wondering, I forgot, I haven't seen a credits list, I don't think, or maybe I forgot to look at it before we chatted, and I didn't realize that Geordie was playing the bass. Great bass. It stuck out to me on certain songs. I'm like, the bass is fucking amazing. Like, it's really cool. And of course, I should have known. It was my good friend Geordie Gordon playing the bass.
It's all Geordie.
There was a point when I was playing the record earlier on in the house, and on Dream, there's this interesting hook towards the end of the song where you repeat no thought and thought. And my wife said, it kind of sounds like the record skipping. I'm like, well, first of all, it's coming through a Bluetooth speaker in my kitchen, so it's not a record, but she mentioned that fact, and I said, I think it's on purpose for effect. The album is called New Love Meditation. And then in Gardens, the chorus, I think, is ostensibly sit and wait. Or sorry, sit, wait, over and over again. And what I'm getting at here, and maybe you can tell, Kass, is that repetition feels almost like a deliberate mantra, a calming sort of invocation or something. I don't know if that's adding a spiritual veneer that you weren't intending, but that's what I thought. I thought it was quite a deliberate choice to just like calm someone down and repeat a couple of words. That's something you hear a lot in certain spiritual or religious practices. You just say the same word over and over again, like Om, or in Hinduism, I would be, as a child, sitting in these rooms with these adults who just would be like, Ram, 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 like God, calling for God. Anyway, sorry, that's too much information for you. Is there anything to what I'm saying in terms of your choices here in repeating the same thing in a almost hypnotic or meditative way? Can you speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for noticing that. Yeah, everything you're saying is dead on. And yeah, when I started to think of these songs, again, I was writing them mostly earlier on in the pandemic. So I was spending a lot of time solo, and I had studied meditation and mindfulness and somewhat practiced it, but not so diligently. But when the pandemic happened, I got much deeper into it and just trying to learn about the history of meditation. And yeah, exactly what you were saying, just the idea of a mantra, and that the repetition of something can actually facilitate or like aid you in letting everything else fall away, which is typically the goal of meditation. So yeah, those particular songs, absolutely. I wanted to try to write songs about meditating somehow. But yeah, like write rock songs about meditating.
Yeah. And I can appreciate why the context might have precipitated this. I will tell you something that I've learned in my life that may be relevant to what you're alluding to. And that is in 2024 and in 2023 and 2022 and some of 2021, people don't like it when I talk about there being a pandemic. And people don't like it when you allude to the fact that it's still happening. Mm-hmm. And my family and I to this day have never had COVID and have never tested positive, I should say, because who knows about these tests. The odd cold here and there, but nothing serious. And one of the reasons is we still, and this is where I get in trouble. People are listening, oh, here he goes. I don't talk about it anymore because I'm like, yeah, I understand. People don't come to these shows, these episodes or these things. They want an escape from reality, maybe, I think. But I know I also have some very thoughtful and diligent and whatever listeners. So my point is, I don't talk about it as much anymore because I get it. Like I've kind of accepted that some people don't care. Meaning like I don't think they care about the implications of making others ill or getting ill themselves. They've just been like, well, you got to go sometime. Like there's this weird thing going on. I don't mean to put too much on you, but I was trying to read between the lines of the biographical information that was sent to me by you about this record. And I'm like, I think Kass and I might be aligned here more than I am with some people. And I know, like, I'm trying to couch this as like, I don't want you to get into a place where people who don't know you are like, oh, that's that pandemic person. But do you want to speak to your
pandemic lady?
Do you want to speak to your own perspective on what's happening with us right now and your own sort of positioning in the world as someone, I think, who still acknowledges that we are not in a good place together? Sorry, very leading question. Please refute or acknowledge anything I've just said.
Oh, no, I totally acknowledge. There's no refuting. Yeah, I think in the broadest sense, the pandemic is just one example of, unfortunately, we don't have the tools or really know how to grieve. And
in real time.
I think
grieve in real time.
In real time. Yeah. So even like right now, it's very hard, I think, in Western society to acknowledge grief and to know what to do with it. And I think the pandemic is just one thing, but a very particular thing that brought that to light.
Well, and I will say, you alluded to Western culture. Don't you think here grieving just means moving on? Like grieving here is processing and moving on. And for those of us who grieve people, that's not possible. They're always with you. By the way, and I know he's a figure on this album in the song Picture, and then this beautiful reprise where you and your daughter are singing together, if I may. I mean, you know, I guess technically you're singing, they are not articulating words, but when I hear it, I'm like, oh my God, it's not a duet, it's a call and response. It's so beautiful. But that was inspired by your late father's passing and that song Picture, which we can talk about. Sorry, weird tangent. But my point being is grieving seems to mean, okay, I went to the funeral, now I'm just going to go back to my life. And that's maybe common in lots of cultures. But what I think you're absolutely right. The grieving mixed with denial, mixed like, what are you going to do when this is a thing where I'm like, no, there's things we can do. It's the same way they said, you know, oh, all these people smoking in a rock club is making everyone else sick. We should stop them from doing that. That was something we could do. This is the same sort of thing, but people are like, nah. Anyway, now I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get in trouble here, Kass. I'll tell you right now. I'm just telling you what's going on.
Well, I think you're speaking the truth. And who's going to get you in trouble? What's
People will leave 1-star reviews
or...
and tell me that I should stop talking about the the pandemic, but like it is a weird time and it causes so much. What I pick up on your record in the way you address it is the alienation that those of us who are still like just reading information about anything, like, oh, it says we probably shouldn't eat that kind of food, so we're going to stop. What are you, some sort of health nut? Well, it says maybe we should just wear masks all the time so we don't infect each other with these, why are there variants? Well, because no one's doing anything. And that's why this thing is perpetuating. What if we all just did the things we're supposed to do? What are you, a health nut? You crazy? You're going to wear a mask your whole life? Well, maybe at this point. And I feel badly for my 12 and 9-year-old who are still doing it. And my wife, as well. And, it's hard to gather for family stuff. We're the only ones there. And some of the family members are like, yeah, I'm on my 3rd, 4th round of the thing. I'm like, have you not read anything? Like one puts you on a track to lots of trouble. And you're at 3 or 4 because you just can't wear a little thing? Like what? Sorry. Yeah. See, I'm going to get in trouble. Going to get in trouble for talking about this. Sorry, Kass. It sounds like you and I might be aligned. And are you feeling that isolation and alienation from adhering to what's going on? What you're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's ongoing. And I think just to get back to even just the idea of grieving, especially earlier on in the pandemic where there was such an unfathomable amount of actual deaths that were happening that were never really acknowledged by people who have power and voice to acknowledge those things. So it's never really been properly recognized, like the immense loss of human life, at least not in the States. And I think, we're certainly still in this era of just figuring out like my husband and I, for example, our daughter who is turning 3 in July, we just split childcare down the middle. So she's never been in daycare or anything like that. And so my entire pregnancy was just being terrified of getting COVID because I got pregnant like at the very end of 2020 and the vaccines weren't even available yet. Yeah. And then eventually I did get vaccinated when I was pregnant. But even, just being in that mindset, being pregnant where it literally changes your brain, where all you're trying to do is just make sure that this creature that's growing inside of you is okay. And I think bringing a child into the world during that time has done things to my brain that I don't even know yet. Yeah, it's going to take quite a while to process it and to have that perspective. I don't feel like it's even been long enough yet to have a clear perspective. And I think we're still living in it. And there is just such a range of like the way that people live their lives, not just these days, but even like early on too.
Oh yeah.
So just do the best you can, I guess. But I definitely think earlier on, I was certainly struggling a good amount with just like what is happening right now. And meditation was essential for me at the time. And that definitely, seeped into the songwriting. But also I think being pregnant, nobody ever tells you that when you're pregnant and also when you give birth, that it's actually very close to death. My birth experience, I had no reference point because this was, again, like the first time that I had experienced giving birth. And
did it take
I do know
was it 5 days? Is that what I read?
Yes. Yes, that's literally, I put it in the song because I was like, I want this to be recorded. I want to remember this. And I want my daughter to like have this kind of time capsule too. I had like every induction method literally under this. I mean, every one that was available, and was on and off like in labor for, I think it was like 3 or 4 days, not like full on, like it's about to happen labor, but just like, it took quite a while and ultimately ended in a cesarean. So I had essentially I was fully ready to give birth, and it just wasn't physically able to happen. And so I had to have a cesarean. So I basically had both. So it was like running the marathon and then having a surgery right at the end or something.
Lord. Wow.
But what I did not anticipate in that time and being in the hospital, I was in the hospital for this experience. I have experienced the death of loved ones, my dad included, who he died when I was younger. I was 11, but obviously had like a pretty huge impact on my life. And I know the feeling of when death happens, it feels like you can feel it. You can feel it when it's there. You can feel that it almost feels like another dimension is opening up and you're stepping into some other dimension and you're sort of existing there. You're like in this other dimension, but you're also still sort of in whatever realm you were in before. And that's very similar to the birth experience. And so when I was actually in active labor, I had a very familiar feeling of death being present.
Wow.
And I think birth is a thing that it also can not go well.
Yeah.
It can be a very scary process. And so I think you're, all these things, you're aware of all these things. And ultimately it was fine. And my daughter came out and she was healthy and we were okay. But it's just that transitional time, and I don't think that's bad. I'm not saying it's just life. I think you become acutely aware that life and death are always like right up against each other like that. And because of the world that we live in, we don't have access to that. But when you're in a situation like a birth situation, or you're with a family member who is dying, all the other stuff falls away. So you actually are able to focus on those things.
Yeah.
And you have that awareness more at the front of your mind.
Right. And that's probably why a death can alter your life. Because it becomes a more tangible thing on some level, that it is going to happen to everyone. And again, I think that's maybe philosophically where a good chunk of the population is at. Like you can't run from it. I still think you avoid it for as long as you can, or you avoid debilitation. I think also if you're a single person, I just don't want to be a burden on anyone. And I think that's a weird part of watching my parents get older and my wife's parents get older. And you can see the fear of losing your faculties in their eyes a little bit. And because their colleagues or their peers or whatever, like, are going through that. And just any day that stuff could happen. So I think that was a really heavy story, Kass. I wasn't expecting that. Wow. And it really makes me rethink your song Picture, because for those who haven't heard it, I believe it is kind of a tie-in between giving birth to your daughter and seeing your late father's face in her and feeling his presence in her. And I think what you just described, I don't know if you were alluding to your father's passing when you were giving birth, that particular relationship you had with death when you were 11 years old and you lost your father. But let me just ask you that. Is that what you were alluding to? Like in that moment, maybe?
I think in that moment, I was alluding to death in general.
Your own mortality in that moment of feeling like you're in a purgatory of some kind.
No, I think actually, yeah. So, I don't know how much time we have, but yeah, another song on the album, which I'm sure you read the lyrics for, Blue.
Yes. Yes.
Is a more recent experience that I had with a partner who died from an overdose. This was when I was living in Philadelphia. In your mid
20s. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You were as the song suggests, you were 24. So
yes.
Yeah, sorry. For anyone who, I didn't mean to interrupt you, and I hope you'll continue your thought, but for anyone listening to Kass's music, it's very direct. Like, I feel like your lyrics are very factual, if I may. Like, I feel like I've already interjected a few times to be like, yeah, it was a 5-day labor, and yes, you were 24 when you unfortunately lost your partner. Like, it's like a little bit of journalism in these personal expressions. So sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to commend you, because if you do spend, anyone listening, if you spend time with the lyrics or the lyric sheet, you're getting real stories. Like, it feels very factual, if that makes any sense.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think it gets at what you were describing earlier, those particular songs. And I think overall the album, and not just this album, but I think in general, I am pretty preoccupied with the idea of things that are not supposed to be talked about. And I think death is a thing that you're not supposed to talk about. But in my experience, that's so much a part of my life, like a part of my identity, and everybody's. That's the thing. Everybody has experienced loss in some sense. And I think I feel like I have a moral imperative to bring that to the surface and to also make others comfortable with talking about it, because that's a part of what makes us human beings. Like, nobody gets through life without losing somebody. And so, those two particular songs, and with the blue song, it is, I hadn't thought of it as journalistic, but it is very factual, because when I started to think of how am I going to write a song about this, because I had never tried to write a song about it, I was just thinking it has to be like the most basic information, like what was happening the days leading up to Jason's death. And all I could think about was I had to give it some kind of structure, which was, I was thinking of colors, like what were something to grab onto, because otherwise it's such a huge experience that it feels like you can't actually articulate it. Yeah. And in some ways, music, it's incredible because music can convey these huge emotions, but it also can be really limiting, right? Because like lyrics can only go so far. It's not like long form writing. So you're sort of just like, what can you fit into, however many lines, like fairly short lines. Yeah. So that was kind of the approach for both of those songs, was just to be as clear as possible. And with Picture, I also was just trying to figure out, it's another thing that I wasn't anticipating about becoming a parent, is that when you've lost someone, if you've lost a parent and then you have your own child, that your kid looks like your parent. It's like so psychedelic. Like my daughter has certain expressions where I'm just like, oh my God, like she looks exactly like my dad. And even before that, before she was born, my dad was like a pretty big guy. He had like a big belly, and I still have some of his jackets. And when I was super pregnant, like past 8 months, just getting ready to have my daughter any day, I was really stubborn about, like, I didn't want to buy new clothes. I tried to like not buy new stuff as much as possible, which is, you're really just kind of fighting. I mean, you kind of have to have other stuff to wear when you're pregnant, obviously, because your body changes quite a lot. But I went into the closet and I got out some of these old jackets, and like my dad's jackets fit me perfectly. So it was so surreal to be walking around in like New England winter and looking down and seeing my belly with my dad's jacket over my belly and feeling sort of like I was my dad, or that I was sort of embodying him in some way. And I also, I think, was just so hyper aware of, I think something you become familiar with for anybody who experiences loss, which again, it's everybody. Yeah. If you're aware of it, things that are joyous and like things that are big, like having a kid or, anything that's like a big deal to you, there's always a tinge of sadness because there's a recognition that someone can't be there to experience it. And I've always been aware of that with my dad, like with losing my dad when I was younger, that anything that was like a big deal, there's always a little bit of like, ugh, cause like, so of course when my daughter was about to be born, I was just having visions of him. It wasn't, his face would just pop up in my head. And it was really nice in that sense. It felt like he was visiting me or something. But I also because I was reading a lot of mindfulness and meditation stuff, which was really helpful, one of the things that I was reading about was that when things are coming up, they're asking to be released. And I do think that especially during my pregnancy and in the process of doing all these, like writing these songs, it was absolutely a way to release some things and make a clearing that needed to happen for me to be a parent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, that was very well said and very thoughtful. And I just want to commend you on this beautiful and I don't know, this album really is getting to me. And I just want to say I really appreciate your this conversation about it, because I think the candor and thoughtfulness that I was kind of picking up on, you've kind of further illuminated some things for me, and it's just going to make me rethink the album as I listen to it some more. And I just want to say it's a really wonderful achievement, and you should be very proud of it. So, before I go much further, Kass, thanks for this talk. And thanks for making this record and for putting these ideas out into the world about life and death and parenting. And you hit my sweet. If you need a demographic analysis, I'm your guy. I'm your demographic. Like, I'm a dad and I'm wondering about the world and what are we doing? And I feel like it's all here. So thank you. I'll say that. I know we're a little pressed for time. So, and we've gone maybe a bit longer than I even thought we would. So let me try to wrap us up here by asking about future plans, any new songs you're working on, or if that's already bubbling. And I don't know, based on our conversation, if you're someone who would tour in this environment, but what's coming up for you? Let's start there.
Yeah. So in the immediate future, I will say, my touring has been quite pared down because of the pandemic and but I am doing a local release show at this place called the Midway Cafe in JP. And that'll be on June 29th. So the album comes out on June 24th. And then, it's the Saturday after the album comes out. And then actually, hopefully it's okay to say this. Geordie and I are trying to hopefully get some shows together this summer to do solo shows, but they're not, it's still, the pieces are coming together. But my dream, I'm okay with saying what my dream is, which is, to have a tour with Geordie with Geordie Gordon, where we do some shows. I think the farthest north we would make it is Montreal. I would love to play in Toronto sometime, but I right now don't have that. Oh, right.
Montreal is closer to Boston than Toronto. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Boston is so far east that Toronto is, but Montreal is not a bad drive at all. So I'll be doing a smattering of shows over the summer. And then I'm also I'm getting ready to work on a soundtrack for a friend of mine who actually, her name's Lindsay Martin. She's an incredible director and animator. And a couple years ago, I did a soundtrack for her for an animated short that she made called Pottero. And I am going to be working on another one for her sometime over the next several months.
Cool.
So that's the immediate plans.
Okay. If people want to learn more about you and how to get this record and those sorts of things, where would you like to direct them on the internet?
I think the best place to go is to my Bandcamp, which is just kassrichards.bandcamp.com. That's where all everything's being sold through that. And it's just streamlined there. So
Okay. Tour dates and everything, if you have any, will be there.
Yeah. Okay. That'll all be up there.
Are you on socials?
Oh yeah, I am on Instagram. That's the only social I do. I just can't handle the other stuff. I just can't do it.
Okay. No, I appreciate that.
But I'm on Instagram. It's just, if you just look up Kass Richards, it's a public account. So
Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. Now, if we can go out on a song from this beautiful new album, I wonder if you can choose one for us. And also let us know why it came to mind.
Well, I think I would have to go with Picture, just based on what we've been talking about. And nobody's heard it yet, so why not just play it? Okay, yeah, I'm pleased for your to play it for folks. By the way, before we leave, you have a Monday album release. You said June 24th, and I saw that in the paperwork.
And I was like, that's got to be a mistake. Records usually come out on Fridays. How'd you end up with a Monday release date? Did you do that on purpose?
Yeah, it's just changing it up.
Okay. So by the time people hear this episode, the album will have been out. So hopefully they've checked it out. But if you haven't, this is great. You can get the album right away. You don't have to wait. And here's a little taste of it. This is Picture by Kass Richards from the new album, New Love Meditation. Kass, really, honestly, a pleasure. And I can't, I'll just stop myself from gushing too much. I just want to say I really enjoyed this. Thank you. And I wish you the best of luck in the future. And if you ever want to talk again, please reach out.
Thanks so much, Vish. I really appreciate it. And it's been lovely talking with you as well. Yeah.
I put your picture on the wall in my room, like some gilded talisman, like you'll be coming home soon. But the image grew faded. You never walked through that door. Said the ghosts always find home. What the hell would they do that for? I know you never had it easy, babe. Restless kid in a one-street town. I never got to know you better than 11 years and you were gone. I wore your jacket around this cold northern town, so far from where I came. Would you even recognize me now? Fit around my swollen belly, kept me warm winter through. In the summer she was born. She looks like you. I know you never had it easy there. Restless kid in the one-street town. I never got to know you better than 11 years and you were gone. But I've got your picture.
There you go. Brand new music by Kass Richards. That was Picture from the now released album New Love Meditation. I just want to thank Kass for appearing on this, the 881st episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Lionsgate Sound Network and is available wherever you get your podcasts. If you can't find an episode you're looking for, or if you want to learn more about me, please visit vishkhanna.com. Also, click on the hyperlink text that says follow Vish online to find me on social media platforms and other ways to access this show if you're not happy with the way you access it. There's some links there in the link tree. Also, please visit patreon.com/creativecontrol to make a flexible monthly donation to sustain me and this work. This is my main job, and the Patreon is what floats the boat. $6 American a month grants you access to ad-free episodes in their entirety, also exclusive content, and there's other tiers as well, and I hope you will check those out with other tiers with other benefits. I just like to hit that $6 American one because that way you don't miss a single episode in its entirety, and yeah, I just want to encourage that. So if you have the means, please support me and my work at patreon.com/creativecontrol. Thank you so much. Also want to thank some independent businesses like Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Ontario, and Granddad's Donuts in Hamilton, Ontario, for their in-kind support for this show. As always, I want to thank my old pal Jim Guthrie in Toronto there. He's got a huge back catalog of songs, and he's always working on things, and he loans me some music that I use on this show. You can learn more about Jim at jimguthrie.org. And finally, thank you so much for listening to this episode with Kass Richards. I hope you were intrigued and will check out this wonderful new album, New Love Meditation, that she made. And I hope you enjoyed our talk. I did very much. And I hope you will subscribe to this podcast if you don't already, and leave nice ratings and reviews on your pod platforms. That does help with the show's visibility on those platforms. Also, hope you'll talk to your friends and tell them about the show. Maybe spread the word about it if you can. But if you don't want to do anything at all and just want to move on with your day, that's fine too. Thanks for being with me, and I will talk to you very soon if you'll have me. Thanks again. Bye for now.